Hey, this is Max. Welcome back to another CSR2 video. This video is brought to you by Nitro for CSR. He has his own YouTube channel, which is in the link of the description. Check him out for information on some of the updated game infos. He usually gets access to that stuff and can give you some interesting information. Now, what we're doing here is to look at the 911 GT3 992. That is the award from the Green Hell event. Now, the good news about the Green Hell event is that it is good for 90 days. You can use the cars that they provide to you to make it through, and the event overall isn't that challenging. However, there are no crates, so you're going to have to use the peta crates, or you just have to get lucky in other ways. Alright, so the big beginning piece of the information, is this car any good? Well, fully maxed, this is a 7.74 dyno car that can run slightly under dyno into the 7.6s. That makes it viable as a live car in the 7.7 lobby, as fully maxed cars tend not to bump as easily as cars that are not fully maxed. That being said, a 7.7 car isn't all that impressive nowadays. Outside of this though, once you start dropping parts, it's not all that impressive as a car that doesn't have stage 6s, meaning it's relatively slow, on the slower side of all T5s, but not terrible. But it's a 10.1 car without stage 6s. 10.1 at stage 5 only, again, isn't that competitive in live because the evo points and the performance point ratio is not that great. So again, it's a 7.6 car if you run it properly with a 7.7 dyno fully maxed. If you're planning to use this car in the coming event to try to win the Mercedes CLK GTR, you're going to have to deal with some speed traps, sprints, and time runs. First of all, stage 6 effects. I'm not going to do them individually like I normally do because this is a review video, but I'm just going to give you a breakdown of the order of effectiveness. The strongest stage 6, not surprisingly, is body, followed by trans, then followed by engine. The rest are pretty bad. Most of these are only dropping about 0.1 to 0.2 in total time versus about 0.6 time for body and 0.5, 0.4 time for transmission. Also, both body and transmission helps a lot with the top speed of the car, even though you would expect intake, turbo, and engine to do that just as well. So, looking at the car's capabilities for hitting a high trap speed within the quarter mile, what I can tell you is that this car is actually really good at speed traps. It can run well past its dyno limits of 259 with these 3 stage 6s. You can probably push it easily into the 300 range. So if Natural Motion is trying to give us a difficult speed trap, they may very well give us something along the lines of 305 or up for the event. Now, even with limited upgrades, this car will hit 289 very easily in speed traps, and meaning it could possibly do 300 plus, much like the American event. If this was the car that's being used and they make the speed trap somewhat difficult, you may very well have to deal with a very high speed trap in but look at this, 311, no issues. That's with the engine intake and also turbo. Now, I can hit almost 300 without any stage 6s and well over 310 with stage 6s. So I anticipate, depending on where they put these speed traps for the actual event, this car will make it through that relatively easily. On the other hand, it is not the strongest car when it comes to sprints because it's a bit of a tire spinner, but it's also not super terrible. So from a sprint standpoint, the car is also decent. So this is not a terrible car to use in sprints. As you can see, it is pretty quick for sprints with strong stage 6s like body and trans installed. You also be looking at 9.2 runtime. The real issue, I think, ultimately for most of us is if they make the runtime challenge very fast. This car needs a lot of stage 6s to get into the 8s, and while it can hit 7.6, ultimately, it's not the best car without stage 6s for making time. 253 mile per hour speed trap means that the car easily can do way beyond that. I suspect you can push maybe 350 or 340s even possibly in the quarter mile with this car. So again, it's a very strong speed trap car, a decent sprint car. The main struggle isn't necessarily going to be either one of those challenges, but rather actually hitting a time with this car. If those lock-ins work out where one lock-in has a particularly slow challenge compared to the others, you may very well be better off using this car for that particular lock-in to try to get a better position for yourself. Now, this one obviously did a little bit slower on that particular run than the others. Let me rerun that. One of the easiest ways to get a higher speed trap with the cars, much like with the Audi LMS and others, you basically skip to the top gear and just hit nitrous once you get to the certain duration. Okay, so we're going to go to 7th, and then we have about 2.5 seconds of nitrous, and that's one way to do it. Notice body and trans, despite having a better on paper performance, actually is not as good for speed traps, and this is already a 53 tire, so you're really not going to get much more out of this. So engine turbo intake ultimately are still important for those speed trap runs. Tire probably won't do much for you. Nitrous, because stage 6 nitrous probably will help, but isn't necessarily going to be the as much of a help as you may think. Transmission tend to always hurt these speed traps for a lot of cars. We're going to take them out and do one more run, and then we'll kind of conclude this video on my overall view on this. So again, 258 in theory, I'm putting it here. Now if I put it here, I may be able to hit to the top, or alternatively go this way where you're using less gears. You have to play around with this in order to find out what may be the strongest gear for a speed trap run. But let's right now put it to 260 and let's see what the numbers actually give us. So once we get into the actual event and this is the car you're going to use, you have to build it. You have to see if you have stage 6s. I think it shares stage 6s with other 992, which is good because you may already have some. Oh, I should have started somewhere else, but okay. But it really depends a lot on which way the car plays out. All right, so right there with nitrous, we moved up to about 316 mile per hour. So nitrous definitely helps when it comes to speed traps. So 300, we took out transmission, added nitrous, and went from 299 right to 316. Again, ultimately, the breakdown of this car is going to be you're going to need some stage 6s in order to probably get through the time challenges in the event. You're probably going to have a pretty easy time with the speed traps, unless it's some crazy, outrageous speed trap that we never imagined would be placed in the game. And as far as sprints, unless you're getting cars that are running under 1.2s for sprints, you should still be okay. So generally speaking, this car is okay for the coming event. It's not super difficult to set up. Porsche Fusions, other than that, pretty strong overall car. And as far as running for time, if you just kind of go into second right away, let me see if I can do a stage 5 only run and see if that still beats dyno by a little bit. You'll be looking at a 10.1 dyno. You should be able to hit 10.0. But from there, as soon as the escalation gets beyond that and gets into the 9s, you're going to have some issues with hitting the top times. So naturally, if you're using this car for any lock-in, you want to lock it in a particular spot that has less difficult challenges. How do you know what's going to be less? Well, you don't. One of the things you may want to do is wait a little bit, let other people kind of get ahead of you and finish the event to give you a better feel for how things may play out. So we're going to do a half-mile run for time. This is stage 5 only, and that will conclude this particular discussion of this car. So again, my shift pattern isn't necessarily the best. It's just what I was using to kind of get the best result I can given the circumstances. I shift right to second and nitrous and write out the nitrous from there. It kind of runs somewhere near or slightly under dyno depending on what level of upgrades you have. So in that case, it did okay, but it's basically very close to what dyno is. You may be up to, because it's stage 5 only, you may want to delay certain shifts slightly or even delay the initial shift. But regardless, this car has limited capabilities in busting dyno and is generally just going to run a little under what the dyno says. So good luck. You have 90 days to acquire this car, so I think unless you're really new and really don't have parts or the cars, you should be able to acquire this car. And if you do and you have some parts in stage 6s, it certainly is a good substitute to use for the lock-in that requires a particular car. It's either this one or the paid Maserati for the coming event. So if that's the case, I would rather use the free prize car, which is this one. Well, thank you for joining me for this video. Feel free to ask me questions. Again, thanks to Nitro for providing me access to the account, allowing me to review a fully maxed car. If you like the video, leave a like. If you like my channel or would like notifications when I put up new videos, subscribe, hit the bell, and you get those notifications. And as always, thank you for watching my videos. I'll catch you next time.